The wind was cold, sharper than any blade, as it clawed at Thalia's bare skin beneath the tattered remnants of her cloak. A cruel twilight draped over the smouldering ruins of the court she had once called home, a place that now smelled of ash and betrayal. The earth was hard and unforgiving under her trembling hands, shards of shattered stone digging into her palms as she knelt there alone, forsaken. Her stormy green eyes, usually fierce and defiant, were now dulled by pain and exhaustion, clouded with the heavy weight of abandonment and accusation. Treason. The word lodged inside her like a poisoned dagger, twisting and burning with each ragged breath she drew. Her fingers brushed against a sharp stone, its coldness reassuring amidst the flicker of shadows that danced around her, the last embers of a life turned to ruin. She thought she might be dying, forgotten by her own clan, left to bleed out in the wilds beyond their borders. How cruel to be cast aside by those whose blood was meant to protect her, whose loyalty she had worn like armor. The faint scar above her left eyebrow itched with every movement, a reminder of past battles, both marked on her skin and embedded deep in her soul. But this wound was worse, invisible, twisting her fate with lies. Thalia forced herself to lift her head, despite the burning in her joints and the hollow ache in her chest. Past the dark tree line that bordered the devastated court, something watched, something fierce. Her breath hitched when she heard the low growl, the faint crunch of heavy paws on hard earth, slicing the silence. She was not alone, not anymore. Then, from the shadows, emerged a beast, massive and wild, its coat brushed with shades of midnight and storm clouds. The creature's ice-blue eyes glistened with cunning and something deeper, an ancient hunger tempered by a protective fire. The Alpha King's beast, the border sentinel, the living emblem of power, no one dared defy. Thalia's heart hammered against her ribs, a dissonant rhythm of fear and something unspeakably raw hope. The beast's snout pressed gently against her cheek, its warmth burning through the cold despair. She reached out trembling, and let her weary fingers rest on its thick fur. The connection was immediate, silent, yet fierce. The Alpha King's beast did not sniff at her with suspicion. Instead, it seemed to understand, to claim her without words. It growled low once more, then eased itself beside her, its presence a shield against the darkness that threatened to consume her. "Come," the beast rumbled, nudging her with insistent urgency. Thalia hesitated, her mind a swirl of doubt and disbelief. Why was she spared? Why was the Alpha King's beast crossing into the ruins at the border to find her, a discarded shadow? But survival was a savage teacher and desperation her tutor. With trembling legs, she allowed the creature to pull her to her feet, to guide her away from the brink of death and the remnants of her shattered past. The journey was torturous, a blind stumble through tangled underbrush and rocky terrain under a moonless sky. Every step felt like an echo of a life she no longer recognized, yet the beast never wavered, constant as the cold stars above. By dawn, with cold fingers clutching a sliver of hope, she arrived at the gates of the Alpha King's fortress. Towering walls of stone loomed dark and ancient, bearing scars like her own. The guards moved silently, eyes narrowed as they beheld her, a stranger, a broken whisper carried by the king's beast. "Who is she?" a sentinel grunted, stepping forward. "This one," the beast growled low, baring teeth not in threat but warning, "belongs to Kaelin now." The gates groaned open, a maw of stone, swallowing the night and casting Thalia's battered form into a chasm of uncertain fates. Every breath was a question. Would she live? Would the Alpha King's mercy be the balm that mended her fractured will? Or was she merely a pawn another secret to be buried in the shadows of his court. Inside, the air was thick with cold stone and whispered tensions. The fortress was a realm ruled by iron and fire, a kingdom shaped by fear and loyalty in equal measure. Thalia was pushed forward on guarded watch, flanked by grim-faced soldiers, whose eyes flickered with disdain and curiosity. Each footfall echoed in her hollow chest as she moved deeper into the heart of the king's domain. Uncertainty, a constant companion beside the beast's unwavering vigilance. The staining of her name as traitor followed her like a ghost in every glance, every muttered curse behind closed doors. The corridors whispered of her weakness, her fall. The court, poised like a viper's nest, watched her silently, a storm gathering behind cold, calculating eyes. Still, beneath the storm of suspicion, Thalia refused to break. Her body was battered, yes. Her trust shattered, certainly. But inside, a quiet flame flickered, small, fragile, yet stubborn as wild grass struggling to reclaim scorched earth. Kaelin himself was an imposing figure even when seated, a mountain of raw muscle and scars carrying the weight of kingship in every measured breath. His raven-black hair was streaked with silver, each strand a testament to battles fought far from the eyes of courtiers. His piercing ice-blue eyes, sharp and unyielding, regarded Thalia with a guarded intensity that made her skin prickle. The jagged scar slicing down his jawline was a visible map of survival, a story whispered in every setting of his jaw. "You will remain here." Kaelin's voice cut through the murmur of the court like a blade forged from ice. "Under watch, not as a prisoner, not yet as an ally, but you will not disappear." The hall seemed to still. The courtiers' eyes narrowed, their lips pursed in thin lines. A woman with curling silver hair exchanged a sharp glance with a young lord, their conspiratorial silence louder than any accusation. "She's weak," a voice muttered, barely concealed beneath the king's command, a withered shadow of a clan's disgrace. Thalia met those eyes, unflinching. "I am not afraid," she said quietly. Voice steady, despite the ache pooling in her limbs. Kaelin's gaze shifted, the faintest twitch of something unreadable flickering within. "You should be," he said, voice low but not unkind, "because many out there wish you dead, and so do some within these walls." The Alpha King's beast settled beside her, a living shield, stirring murmurs through the court. No word could deny its presence, that wild protective force bound to her with something primal, something beyond allegiance. Courtiers whispered beneath their breaths, their silences sharp as daggers aimed in the dim light. But the beast's loyalty was a promise none dared defy. Night crept over the fortress like a velvet shroud, but the court shadows did not retreat. In the depths of the dungeon, Thalia moved with quiet purpose, the faint glow of a flickering torch catching the curve of her determined face and the wild curls that tumbled free from her loose tie. Despite the damning whispers from above, she tended to the wounded scout without complaint, her hands skilled, though gentle as she worked, to staunch the crimson stains that seeped through layered cloth and leather. The man's pain was raw, ragged breaths tearing from his chest like small cries for mercy. Yet her voice found a steady rhythm, a soft, almost haunting hum, threading its way through the cold air, a melody woven from memory, hope, and resilience. Each note breathed life into the silence, the small sanctuary of healing amid war's looming threat. "Thank you," the scout's voice was a rasp, eyes fluttering open to meet hers. Thalia offered a faint, weary smile. "Rest now. You must gather your strength." Outside the dungeon's barred door, the Alpha King's beast lingered in the shadows, muscles taut, senses sharp. though Kaelin refused to acknowledge what was stirring beneath the surface. This strange bond, this thread of empathy, the beast stood unwavering, silent, sentinel, and fierce protector. Its loyalty to the woman, cast into hell by her own blood, was fierce, unwavering, and absolute. Thalia felt its presence like a heartbeat in the dark, a pulse that spoke of fights yet to be fought, of truths yet to be uncovered. Somewhere, buried beneath the weight of fear and betrayal, a quiet strength stirred, something ancient and wild that no court intrigue, no blade, no false accusation could ever finally break. She was more than a waitress, more than a traitor, more than discarded, and the Alpha King was watching. The invasion tore through the court like a savage tempest. The first clang of steel against steel was a crack of thunder, sending ripples of panic through the halls. Shouts erupted, spilling over walls and echoing down stone corridors. The scent of smoke and blood thickened the air, and the distant cries of warriors reverberated with a chilling finality. Yet through the chaos, amid the cacophony of battle and the desperate scramble of armored forms, Thalia did not waver. Her stormy green eyes, fierce and steady, cut through the maelstrom like a beacon. Soldiers stumbled through the cluttered courtyard, some limping, others clutching arrows embedded deep in flesh. Their faces were masks of exhaustion and terror, hope flickering weakly behind hastening breaths. Thalia moved among them, graceful, sure, an unyielding calm, carved from the depths of her being. She barked quiet commands, directing two men to carry a wounded footman onto a battered wooden stretcher. Her voice was low, precise, unwavering, a steady pulse against the thudding chaos. "Here," she said, grasping a rag and pressing it against a deep gash on a soldier's forearm. His fingers twitched, pain twisting his features. "Hold still. I'll stop the bleeding." The soldier blinked up at her, the harsh lines of battle momentarily forgotten. You're not afraid?" A faint, almost ghost-like smile ghosted over Thalia's lips as her hands worked deftly. "Fear is a luxury none of us can afford." Around her, others crashed into the fray, snarling and desperate. But Thalia seemed untouched by the storm. Her movements were fluid, purposeful. A hand to a bleeding temple, a whispered instruction to brace a broken limb, a soothing word offered to a trembling recruit. This was not the fury of the battlefield, but a quiet sanctuary carved with urgency, a place where wounds could begin to close even as the world burned from the shadowed corners of the court. The Alpha King's pack watched with incredulity. Broad-shouldered warriors, seasoned in dozens of battles, paused in their deadly dance to witness the spectacle. Whispers passed between them, mostly disbelief, some suspicion. How could this woman, this waitress and cast-off, stand untouched while the court shattered in shards of chaos? How could she command such composure when so many around her fractured? Kaelin himself stood beneath the great stone pillars, his piercing ice-blue eyes fixed on her like a blade, his jaw tightened, the jagged scar etched across his neck pulsing faintly beneath the skin. Every instinct screamed that this woman harbored more than mere resilience. She was a storm cloaked in calm, an unbroken spirit weaving hope through destruction. A peculiar thread of something ancient and wild wound itself through his veins as he watched, and no amount of pride or fear or denial could sever it. The clash of weapons drew closer to the courtyard's heart. The roars of invaders pressed in like smoke curling through cracks. Soldiers needed healing, leadership, a hand to hold steady. Thalia gave them that hand. She was the calm at the eye of the storm, unflinching, unshakable, when the last echoes of the incursion had faded and the wounded settled in the dim rooms of the keep. The stories began. They started as whispers, soft as a breath beneath the shifting moonlight, passing from soldier to soldier, servant to noble. They spoke of her, The fires she could quell with a touch, the shadows she bent like clay, the silence she wove into armor. They say she commands more than healing, a young guard murmured close to the barracks, eyes wide with awe. They say she speaks to the spirits, that the wildness inside her is not of this world. Another soldier shook his head, grim-faced. I've seen those hands steady a dying man with nothing but a soft word and a glance. There's power in that. In her power, the king's men don't know how to reckon with. Even the hardened veterans exchanged uneasy looks. Rumors of magic, or something deeper, spread like wildfire, igniting both hope and fear. The court, fraught with suspicion and political poison, buzzed with the possibility that the waitress was no simple castaway. She was something elemental, something feared. Late that night, beneath a moon, sharp and cold as a blade, Kaelin sought her out. The courtyard was a quiet refuge bathed in silver light, the stones glinting beneath their feet as if the very earth held its breath. He approached her slowly, the weight of the crown pressing down on him heavier than ever. Around them, shadows pooled and shifted, witnesses to a fragile moment about to fracture. "People talk!" Kaelin's voice was low, edged with a mixture of challenge and curiosity. "They say you have powers. That you are, not what you pretend to be." Thalia's green eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "Let them talk." Her fingers absent-mindedly traced a jagged scar on her forearm as though it contained the world's secrets. "Power is meaningless without purpose." His gaze sharpened. "And what is your purpose then? Why hide what you are?" For a moment, her stormy eyes flickered, not with fear, but with something infinitely older, because truth can be a weapon as dangerous as any blade. And some truths are not ready to be wielded. Kaelin's laugh was low and mirthless. "No more secrets, Thalia. Not now. The court is breaking, and I need to know where you stand." She took a slow breath, as if steadying a wild horse within her chest. "I stand with what is right, with those who survive." The corners of Kaelin's mouth twitched, a subtle cracking in the impenetrable walls he'd built around himself for years. "And me?" His voice dropped, barely above a whisper, the ice blue of his eyes softening. "Where do I stand?" Her gaze flickered to his, unguarded for a flicker, and then she smiled, small, uncertain, but real. Somewhere unexpected, their words hung in the moonlight, a fragile promise. In that silence, something shifted deep inside Kaelina, stirring of hope masked by steel and scars. Days later, in the labyrinthine depths of the castle's ancient library, Thalia uncovered a secret that made the ground tilt beneath her feet. She found herself poring over dusty tomes, yellowed pages curled and cracked, ink faded but still alive with whispered histories. She traced a lineage that wove her bloodline to the very heart of Kaelin's dynasty. Names long buried, intertwined like the roots of an ancient tree, prophecies written in forbidding ink words that spoke of a daughter cast out, a bloodline severed but not broken, a fate that would return like a tide unstoppable and pure. Her breath caught in her throat as the implications unfurled. A reason for the relentless attacks on the court, the venom in the eyes of those who labelled her traitor, the shadow that stalked her every step. She was no accident, no victim of chance. She was part of a legacy greater than herself, a key to a future none dared hope for. Torn between disbelief and inevitability, her mind raced. Could she accept this truth? Could she reconcile the outcast and the heir? Power and promise twisted inside her like a storm thrashing against a prison wall. A low growl at her side pulled her from the pages. Kaelin's beast stood silent and watchful, muscles rippling beneath thick fur eyes, like molten ice reflecting both the past and the uncertain horizon. It did not speak in words, but its presence was a tether, a watchful guardian affirming something primal and unshakable. She belonged here, among this fractured dynasty, in the heart of the Alpha's realm. Her place was no longer a question, but a decree written in the blood and bone that tied them together. Thalia closed the heavy book reverently, hands trembling with a mix of awe and fear. "So this is why," she whispered to the darkness, "this is why they want me gone." The beast nudged her gently, a silent vow that neither bloodline nor betrayal, and somewhere deep inside, armed with newfound knowledge and tempered strength, Thalia felt the faintest stirrings of something once broken begin to heal, like roots gripping stone, like fire held steady against the night. The court storm was far from over, but now she stood armed, not just with courage, but with destiny, and the Alpha King was watching still. The court had never been a place for subtlety, but the betrayal that unfolded beneath Kaelin's watchful gaze tore through the grand hall like a razor's edge. The gathered nobles, their finely tailored leathers and embroidered furs, gleaming under chandelier light, stiffened in disbelief as the truth spilled raw and unmistakable. The man who had so recently claimed alliance and trust to silver-tongued lord, whose words had once echoed with promise, now stood exposed as a traitor, his mask shattered by the Alpha King's unyielding confrontation. Kaelin's voice cut through the murmurs, low and cold with rage, barely contained. "You, Malric, would stand against your own blood, your own pack. You would offer our enemies the keys to our gates and the names of those who defend this court?" His ice-blue eyes blazed with a fury that mirrored the jagged scar slicing through his jaw. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. This was a wound inflicted on him as much as on his people. Malric's facade crumbled under the weight of accusation. His lips twisted into a sneer, but it was one born of desperation rather than defiance. "You see only what you want to see, Kaelin. The court needs change strength from unexpected places." His gaze flickered briefly toward Thalia, as if trying to plant doubt in the fragile alliances around her. But she stood unmoved, calm and poised as she met Malric's challenge with steady eyes. Her deep green gaze, stormy and implacable, did not waver. The faint scar above her left eyebrow caught the flicker of torchlight, as if daring anyone to question her, daring them to underestimate the steel beneath her grace. The hall was silent, save for the quiet, resonant calm that radiated from her presence, a beacon that unsettled even the most stubborn skeptics. Kaelin's beast, a hulking figure of shadow and muscle at his side, growled a low warning, though it was Thalia's steadiness that truly unmoored the courtiers. They had counted her a trembling waif, a fallen traitor's daughter, a forgotten piece on their chessboard. Instead, she was the axis upon which their fragile order teetered, the force they could not ignore. The nobles shifted uncomfortably as the weight of her silent strength settled over the room. Whispers surged like a rising tide, some admiring, many fearful. But none dared break the line of her dignity, nor the king's unyielding gaze that framed her as something far beyond their narrow prejudices. Kaelin's rejection of Malric was not merely a political statement, it was a declaration that loyalty to the pack came before all, and that strength, raw, unvarnished, and undeniable, would determine the future. Malric's retreat was swift, his ambitions dashed by the unshakable alliance forged in that moment. The pack's reaction was a tremor that rippled through the very foundations of the court. Those who had doubted the Waitress now regarded her with a newfound wariness, as if she carried in her bones a hidden storm that could rend their walls and wash away their old orders. The shift was palpable, silent, but seismic. That night, after the court had emptied and shadows reclaimed their dominion, Thalia found herself drawn to the roaring hearth where Kaelin sat, his posture relaxed for the first time in days, a fire burning low and steady. The heat painted flickering patterns across his sharp features, softening the hard lines carved by years of battle, loss, and relentless duty. For a moment, the tension that had gripped the court dissolved into the quiet crackle of flames. Thalia settled nearby, the warmth seeping into her chilled bones, the beast curling like a shadow at her feet, a protector unyielding, yet gentle, in its closeness. The room seemed to shrink around them, a world apart from schemes and betrayals. Kaelin's voice was rumbling deep and raw when he broke the silence. "You surprised me today. Not with your power, there is strength there, yes, but with your composure. I expected rage or despair. Instead, you stood like a mountain, unmoving." "I had no choice," Thalia replied softly, her voice steady but edged with the weight of unshed emotions. "If I had faltered, if I had shown weakness, they would have consumed me whole." He nodded, eyes narrowing as if weighing her words, searching beneath their surface. "We both carry wounds," he said finally, his gaze steady. "Your past is a battlefield of shadows and blood. Mine is etched in scars no one else can see." She let the silence between them stretch, feeling the fragile thread that tethered them, not as king and outcast, but as two souls bruised by life's merciless hand. "I was left to die," she whispered, as if saying it aloud gave the memory form and weight, "by those who should have protected me, and I," Kaelin said quietly, "was betrayed by those I called my own, my blood, my kin." His fingers twitched, a flicker of old pain surfacing. "Sometimes I wondered if I was meant to rule a kingdom of ghosts." Thalia reached out, her hand hovering over his, hesitant but resolute. The firelight wove warmth between them, a fragile bridge. "You are not alone in this," she said. "Neither of us. Perhaps that is why fate brought us here, to face the past and reshape the future together." He met her gaze then, the king stripped bare of command and armor, revealing the raw man beneath, a man who longed for trust and understanding as much as he demanded loyalty. Slowly, his hand closed over hers, in a silent vow, a tentative tether against the abyss of loneliness. The beast let out a deep, approving rumble, inching closer to rest its massive head against Thalia's thigh. It was a rare show of affection, a gentle reminder that she was protected not only by steel and will, but by fierce, unspoken loyalty. That night, beneath the watchful eyes of stars and the glow of the hearth, barriers began to crumble, walls forged by fear and pain, yielding to the possibility of something new, something fierce and unwavering. But the dawn brought more than light. It summoned secrets best kept in shadow, stirring the embers of latent power deep within Thalia. Under the pallid gaze of the full moon, the forest outside the court murmured with ancient magic, the air thick with possibility. Thalia slipped away from the watchful eyes of the castle, her silhouette slipping through silvered trees, muscles taut with purpose. The cool night kissed her skin, carrying the scent of moss and earth, the rustle of leaves, a symphony whispering secrets older than time. There, beneath a canopy of stars, she allowed herself to breathe in the raw pulse of the wild, the relentless heartbeat that coursed in her veins. With each measured breath, she stretched, limbs moving fluid and precise, training her body until muscle memory erased weakness. The moonlight caressed the scar above her eyebrow, illuminating the fierce determination etched in every line of her face. But it was not just her body that stirred. A slow, elemental awakening unfurled, a trembling surge of power coiling beneath her skin like a coiled serpent ready to strike. Her hands glowed faintly, a subtle radiance that hummed with energy, resonant and untamed. The air itself seemed to bend toward her will, leaves quivering as if alive, shadows deepening as if in reverence. She closed her eyes, reaching inward, grasping at the tendrils of force barely contained. The memory of the book's words, of the bloodlines and betrayal, wove through her mind, imbuing her with a strength born, not of domination, but of survival and ancestral fire. From the edge of the clearing came a soft shift of movement. Kaelin's beast, sleek fur, almost luminous in moonlight, appeared silently, pressing close with a quiet vigilance. Its eyes, those pools of molten ice, flickered with an unfamiliar tenderness as it circled before resting near her feet. Thalia opened her eyes, meeting the creature's gaze, sensing its protective presence as more than instinct, a rare bond forming in the stillness. The beast nudged her gently with its massive head, a gesture that spoke of trust, acceptance, and a shared understanding of the shadows they both navigated. She reached out, brushing her fingers through the thick fur, feeling the warmth radiate beneath her touch. It was a small, intimate tether, a silent pact forged beneath the indifferent gaze of the stars. Each session beneath the moon's pale glow drew more from her spirit, unlocking reservoirs of power that shimmered beneath the surface of her mortal skin. The lines between human and something more blurred, her strength weaving into the very fabric of the court's mysteries. As dawn threatened the horizon, she stood tall and unyielding, the air around her charged with a fierce vitality. The court might still doubt her. The nobles might whisper behind silken fans and polished stone, but deep inside, something primal and indomitable surged forward. The Alpha King's beast rose, its deep growl, a promise and a warning, patrolling the boundary as if warding off unseen dangers. Yet, when its gaze found hers, it softened, the wildness, tempered by a burgeoning affection expressed in subtle gestures, a lowered head, a lingering presence, the trust of a guardian who sees beyond the surface. In those quiet, stolen moments, Thalia felt the threads of her fractured destiny begin to weave anew. Strength born from sorrow, loyalty kindled in fire, and a future, shaped not by the gods or the past, but by those brave enough to claim it. Against the dark sky and the murmurs of the awakening forest, the Waitress no longer stood alone. She was becoming a force the court had never imagined, and Alpha forged in shadows and light, watched over by the king and protected by the power stirring deep within her soul. Beneath the fractured light of dawn, the court felt like a fragile glass sculpture, beautiful, intricate, but endlessly vulnerable. The air hung heavy, with a disquiet that wasn't born of exhaustion or lingering night, but something far colder and sharper, truth, knowing it could either fracture their fragile alliance or bring them unexpectedly closer. Kaelin and Thalia faced each other in the silent chambers of the war room, eyes locked but guarded. Kaelin's voice was a low rasp, threaded with incredulity and an unmistakable edge of pain. "You knew." The accusation rolled beneath the weight of years left unspoken. "All this time, you knew the source of the poison coursing through my court." Thalia's stormy green eyes didn't waver, but the faint scar above her brow tightened as memories clawed at her resolve. "I didn't want to believe it. I thought it was only shadows, whispers meant to fracture us, but the truth was buried deeper. It was never just some external enemy." The room grew colder, shadows deepening where lanterns flickered. She took a step closer, the soft scrape of her boots against the ancient stone magnifying each beat of her heart. It was betrayal from within. Kaelin's face hardened, memories twisting his usual calm. "My brother?" Words like daggers carving open wounds neither had expected to revisit. The name echoed between them, unspoken yet resonant. A betrayal that had shattered Kaelin's reign before it had truly begun. He clenched his fists, jaw muscles taut as the jagged scar along his neck pulsed faintly, a reminder of a battle etched in flesh and memories. I thought I'd crushed him, ended it for good. But he was never gone, Thalia said evenly, threading her voice with the quiet steel that had carried her through exile and dread alike. And his poison spread slow, silent, undermining your pack from within. I found proof, Kaelin. I found the tendrils of his schemes woven into your council, your trusted lieutenants, even the nobles who smile too easily. They feed him, that serpent, from the inside. For a long moment, Kaelin was silent. Then the raw vulnerability slipped through, rare as a winter sun cutting through heavy ice. Why didn't you tell me? Why keep it hidden? Thalia's breath came steady but bitter. Because I had no proof that would stand in your court. Because I feared it would break you, break us both, before we had a chance to build something real. Her eyes softened in a flicker of truth. Because I was afraid that if I spoke it aloud, I'd lose what little ground we'd gained. The storm in Kaelin's ice-blue eyes crackled, a conflict of fury and fractured hope. You didn't trust me? No, she said quietly. Not fully, and I won't lie, I'm still not sure if I should. The fragile alliance between them trembled, cracking under the weight of truth and half-truths. But now we stand on the edge of destruction either way. I had to be sure we were ready, that you were ready. Their gazes locked, bearing wounds stripped of armor. Each held memories jagged and scarred, their pasts intertwined with betrayal and loss. And yet, beneath the fractures, a hesitant pulse of understanding flickered, a fragile spark forged in shared pain. This war isn't just against my brother, Kaelin finally admitted, voice rough with the ache of surrender. It's against the rot that's crawled into every corner of my kingdom. Against the lies we've told ourselves. Thalia swallowed down the tide of bitter disbelief, inhaling the scent of cold stone and metal. The air pulsed with the weight of choices imminent, the clashing of legacy and newfound loyalty. Then we fight together, she said, voice steady, eyes fierce. No more secrets. His face softened, the hardness momentarily melting into something fierce and vulnerable all at once. No more hiding. They stood like fallen monarchs, stripped of pride, but not of purpose, hearts beating defiantly amid the chaos of their revealed pasts. Their alliance, once fragile, now bore the crackling energy of truth unleashed, dangerous but real. Steel clanged against steel beneath a sky, bruised with dusk, the air thick with the tang of blood and smoke. The court, once a bastion of whispered intrigues, muttered fear into the wind as the invaders broke through the barricades, shadows spilling over ancient stones with the hunger of wolves. The king's pack responded with desperate, rallying cries, warriors clashing with ferocity that echoed the primal heartbeat of their realm. At the center of the tempests stood Thalia, her body a graceful tempest amid the madness. Wild curls whipped around her face, flushed with exertion and the fierce glow of power finally unleashed without restraint. Her deep green eyes burned with a wolf's vengeance as she cut through the chaos, every movement a blend of precision and raw, strength-leading, fighting, unyielding. Kaelin fought beside her, his jagged scar gleaming darkly in the firelight, muscles coiled like a panther, ready to strike. And yet, more than his raw ferocity, it was the way their gazes met mid-battle, a silent vow forged in the heartbeats between blows that fueled the firestorm raging inside her. The king's beast, a towering form of shadow and muscle, prowled beside Thalia like a storm incarnate, lips curled back in a growl, teeth bared as it shredded enemies with lethal grace. But its eyes, those piercing ice-blue flames, found Thalia's again and again, tethering fury with trust, loyalty with love. She felt it deeper than muscle and bone. The beast was no longer just an extension of Kaelin's wrath. It was part of her, now a shared spirit joint, and fierce as their intertwined destinies. When a shielded assailant lunged with cruel intent, Thalia's blade sliced through the darkness as the beast tore into the attacker's flank. The assault blew back, carving fleeting wakes of red-painted dust across the battlefield. "Keep forming lines!" Thalia shouted, voice sharp like flint and clear over the din. "Protect the nose."